Hello, and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm. This is a show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I am Scott Goldfine, your host, musicologist, and author of Everything's on the One, the First Guide to Funk. If you don't have your copy, get on over to Amazon and pick one up. You'll be glad you did. As always, whether you're watching or listening, I thank you so much for your continued interest and support. Speaking of which, hopefully you have subscribed to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube. That's where Truth and Rhythm resides. If you haven't, be sure to do so. Tell a friend, tell a family member, need that support. This episode features two of the original horn players of one of the baddest horn-based funk groups of all time, Mick Grudge and Morris Price of Brass Construction. Formed in Brooklyn, New York, and originally known as Dynamic Soul, the band changed its name, and with producer, composer, arranger, multi-instrumentalist Randy Muller leading the way, they embarked on a 10-year run of hit albums and songs beginning in 1975. Brass Construction's debut included what would be its most successful single, a jamming track called Movin, that topped the R&B chart and went to number 14 on the pop charts. That helped push the album to be certified for platinum sales. That record also included the number 3 dance chart tune, Changin. The band would release 9 more albums that yielded 5 additional top 40 R&B hits. Among those, along with other notable tracks, were Ha Cha Cha, The Message, What's on Your Mind, Love You, which is talk about loving. It's among my favorite funk jams of all time. Wake Up, Get Up, Right Place, the super funky Get Up to Get Down, Do Ya, How Do You Do What You Do to Me, Can You See the Light, Attitude, Walkin the Line, Partyline, and Zig Zag. Although in transitioning from the 1970s to 1980s, the ferocious horns became less prominent in favor of synthesizers, which was the case for virtually all of the R&B bands that came out of the 70s. Brass Construction managed to consistently deliver catchy funk tunes with each release. Yet there was dissension within the ranks, and in 1985, it would be the group's final album release of studio work. While Muller had become involved with protege acts like Sky, another Truth and Rhythm guest, Grudge and Price, who were also multi-instrumentalists and composers, had latched on to other preoccupations as well. And beginning in the latter 1980s, Grudge and Price spearheaded the revival of Brass Construction as a live act. In this in-depth interview, the pair recount the group's entire history, including the albums, tracks, stage antics, band dynamics, seldom told stories, legal wrangling, and returning to perform once again and preserve the legacy. I worked with these great guys for several months to bring this to fruition, and so I'm so pleased that not only did it finally happen, but it turned out so well. I think you'll find it as fun and enlightening as the three of us did. So with that, let's get ourselves together, get higher, and move on with Brass Construction. I'm so pleased to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership saxophonist, bass, guitar, and keyboard player, singer, and composer Mick Grudge, and trumpeter, keyboard, and percussion player, singer, and composer Morris Price, both original members of New York's 1970s horns-heavy funk powerhouse Brass Construction. Guys,
right.
So glad you could join me today. How are you? We have, first I'll show you Mick right there.
Hey, how are you doing? Nice to see you.
And then we have Morris here.
Hey, how you doing, everybody?
Excellent. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And so much respect for, the music and the legacy from Brass Construction and the work that you guys have done. So I can't say enough about it. I remember, when I first heard Movin back in 75 or whenever it was, and I mean, it just grabbed my attention. And from that point on, I bought, of course, the first record and every one of them when they came out. So.
Okay. So I could get some money from you, huh?
Yeah. Well, you kept it going, one winner after another. So, and then you guys also worked with some of the other groups too, like or at least they were part of the same mix of groups out of the same area with BT Express and Sky and all these other ones. So we'll get into that, but good times. So
right, very good times.
Okay.
And Morris, you're coming to us from where today?
I'm coming to you from Miami, my new home as of 2 years ago. I don't know if I'm staying here because there's no place like New York, but for now I'm in Miami, trying to feel it out.
Yeah. Well,
the
it's
weather's great.
warm and humid.
The weather's great, so you can't beat that.
And Mick, where are you coming to us from today?
I'm from New York, Long Island, just outside of New York City, 20 minutes outside of New York City, a town called Great Neck, New York.
So you stuck a little closer to the brass origins there.
Yeah, we're about 45 minutes from Brooklyn, so where I'm living right now.
Excellent. All right, well, I'm going to jump into the questions that I've been anxious to ask you guys. We're going to go way back, test your memories a little bit, and talk about, where are you from originally, and when did you first get into music? So I'll throw that first at Morris.
Ooh, well, how far you want me to go back to the beginning?
Well, where are you from originally, and when did you first start getting into music?
Originally, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised. I went to school in Brooklyn. I started out actually playing or getting interested in music in the 5th grade. And that was in, elementary school. And I started out at that time playing trombone and going back and forth trying to find my niche. I went from trombone to trumpet to sax, to clarinet, to tuba, all trying to find, my niche, so to speak. And finally, when I got into, say, junior high school, I kind of settled down to trumpet. And basically, that's where I'm from. I don't know how much you want me to go into it, but.
Well, did you have much of a musical family or a musical environment, and did you take any lessons?
No, not really. I had my brother's sister's much older than me, about 10 years. And I remember them singing a little doo-wop back in the days, I'm talking about when they were teenagers. So that would have made me about 6 or 7 years old. So I don't remember too much. And then my brother went into the military, so that music thing kind of blocked out. So basically, I'm the only one that really, got a little hand into music. And like I said, I started out in junior high, elementary, and then was basically classical music, so to speak, and then went into junior high. And, like I said, I dabbled with instruments back and forth, which I didn't know at the time that was a no-no, but it worked out for me.
Which instrument is your favorite?
Well, like I said, I settled down with trumpet, but I'm the type of guy I'm like this. I like percussions. I like playing drums. Matter of fact, in our show, I play drums in a couple of songs in the show, and but I never really studied. Basically, I studied horns, horn playing in school, and that's what I would say about the best. So if to answer that question, I would say trumpet.
Very good. Thank you. And Mick, what about you? What was it like for you? Where were you born? And did you have a musical family? What made you move to music?
Yeah, I have a musical family, but I was born in Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica, but I moved from Jamaica to England when I was 2 years old. So I was pretty much brought up and raised up in Sheffield, England, where my father used to play ukulele, so they put me into music school when I was in England, and I played in local bands over there. One was called Travelers Express. I was pretty young. I played saxophone, but I also played other instruments like bass, like guitar, keyboards. But yeah, started out very young with cousins and stuff like that doing shows. So I was at the background. Then around early 70s, came to New York. Actually, I came to New York to play soccer, actually. But I ended up going to Thomas Jefferson High School, and I met a number of the guys that were playing in the jazz band at the time at Thomas Jefferson High School. We're talking about 1970 now, around there. And from there, these guys, Price, Muller, Wade, Wayne Paris, they were playing under the name of Dynamic Souls. And so I kind of like had another band that I was playing with called Shades of Black. They liked what I was doing with that band as a horn player. So they asked me to be in the band, so we used to hang out. We used to hang out at Price's house and Price's house, and then we started to really get serious with horns. Before Dynamic Souls, we had a few horns, but we settled in with 5 horns, and that's what kind of like framed brass construction after we got invitations to do recording contracts and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's basically where I met. I met these guys in jazz band, around, got to be about 1970.
Mm-hmm. And Morris, were you already part of that entity when Mick came along, or when did you guys connect?
Okay, well, I started with the band, like Mick said. The group was called Dynamic Souls, and the summer between middle school going to high school is a funny story. It's kind of a long story. I won't really get into it, but trying to make it short, I have got, I can't make it short. I will tell you the story. I wanted to go to performing arts high school. Okay. That, if you know anything about performing arts, you should know what type of school it was. It was the best in the city. And I didn't take the test. Reason why I didn't take the test, because my music teacher told me, really gave me a bombshell and made me so mad that I wouldn't pass. So that was something to tell me, after I was one of his favorite students. But he had the nerve to tell me, which I didn't understand then, which, after a while I understood, that it was so many trumpet players that was auditioning that it would be better if I go back and play tuba, and I had 6 months that I probably would get in. And I was insulted, like, wait a minute. So anyway, long story short, I had got mad at him. We kind of fell out, and I was like totally destroyed, and we stopped speaking, so to speak. But anyway, I'm getting to how I got into brass. Well, at that summer, right, which I wound up going to another high school, that summer, he was looking for me to invite me to join this summer program, which was sponsored by the Board of Ed. It was an orchestra, summer orchestra, which you get paid, and you get able to perform and play and practice and do whatever. So, long story short, he found me, and we made up and everything. He told me the reason. I understood that there were so many trumpet players auditioning, and if I would have played tuba, I would have got a better chance, because I was bouncing back for so many instruments and it was the same fingering. I could read bass clef. It would took me like 6 or 7 months, and I should have listened, but I didn't. But anyway, I wound up going to the summer program, and in this summer program, that's where I met most of the guys: Randy Muller, Larry Payton, Wade Williamson, Jesse Ward. They was in that same summer music program, and it was like, I would say something like the 3rd week of June, something like that. It started 4th week of June, right just before school was out, at the end of school, and they invited me to come rehearse with them and play for a show for the 4th of July. So I was like, whoa, 4th of July, that's only like next week or something. So they said, okay, well, so I went in and, I played. We did some James Brown, Crooner Gang, and, a lot of songs we would do with, instrumental, musical versions of, songs. And, I liked it. So I was invited to stay. And that's basically how I got in, the summer of 1970.
And just to get the time frame right, so then Mick came along how much later?
I think Mick came along in about 72, Mick?
No, right. 71, right after when I got into, we was in Thomas Jefferson. I was in the same band, jazz band with Marla Wade and a couple of the guys.
Right. So that's the year.
So it was 70, 71 when I got in with the band. And because, we graduated. Me and Marla graduated in January of 72. So it must have been in 71 when I started playing with Dynamic Soul at the time.
So when that group was together and you were both part of it, what were your first impressions of, Randy Muller, who of course would go on to be a key figure in brass construction? Was he gregarious? What were your first impressions of him and a couple of other key members of the band when you first sort of connected with them and met them? You want to jump in first with that, Morris?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. When I first met Randy, which was in, the music program, and I wasn't only really musicians, so to speak, I hung out with at that time, but I wasn't never in a band. I was basically in school band. And the other musicians I hung out with was older and more seasoned, like my music teachers, friends, and we had a little group that we played. He played for the Salvation Army band, and we would play with them, and they were definitely more talented than us, and basically all the students was on the same level. But when I got into this music program, most of the students were on the same level. But when I met Randy and he started playing, I was like, oh my God, I didn't believe it. He was like, to me, I tell you the truth, he was the most talented person I ever met, my age. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I was in awe, at that time. And then basically as an arranger, he was the best. There wasn't no other person around. Even after I started moving around, after, I started playing with brass, what Dynamic Souls at that time, I started moving around now, checking out other groups since I was in my group. And, I found out that he's still one of the most talented guys that I knew that was in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Mick? What were your first impressions?
Well, definitely talented. Had a big ego. We had music class together. We did arrangements together and stuff like that, and for jazz. And obviously, it was a pretty talented class. Quite a few musicians went on to bands that you might have known. But there was competition. When we would hang out, we would jam, and everybody's trying to top each other in terms of, in a friendly way. And he was always very talented in his musical skills and everything like that. Arranging, writing music. When we had to do our compositions, me and Mo would probably always get A's. So me and him would compete under those circumstances. But he's an outgoing guy. That time, very friendly, and just any kind of jam, anything going on in music, he'd call us, hey, let's go down and have a jam with this band. Let's hang out here because we're gonna have some good musicians down there. And that's the kind of guy he was. It's all about music for him. He didn't really do anything else. As for me, I had other interests. Like I said, I used to be an athlete. I played soccer, so it wasn't 100% day in, day out. It was like 80% at that time in my life. So, but with Muller, 100%. And he would go to class with his flute. And you would never see him without his flute. So in class, if teachers are not around, he'd pull out his flute and start doing his scales. And then we're walking in the hallway and you hear the flute going. That's where Muller is. Around the corner.
Like a Pied Piper.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, he was very, very talented. And he played all instruments also. His background is he's from British Guiana. He's an immigrant. It was a band that was made up of a lot of different personalities. A lot of us were from different backgrounds. Like again, I was from England, and Wayne Paris was from Jamaica. Joe Wong was from Trinidad. Muller's from Guyana. Morris was a Brooklyn boy, and we had Wade, who was from Deep South, and so we all clung together in terms of music. And back in the days, it was pretty rough neighborhood, but music kept us out of trouble.
Yeah, it sounds like the makeup of the band really reflected that melting pot, of that area of the country at that time. What could you speak to me a little bit more about what the musical flavor was in the early 70s in that part of the country? And what were some groups that you guys looked up to before you started doing it on your own?
Well, it's funny because the group itself, we would play, renditions of, like I say, vocal groups, and using the flute as the vocals, and most of our stuff was instrumental, But basically, we looked up Chicago. We played stuff from Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Of course, James Brown. That was, the funk stuff. Mandrill. We had the tip of the iceberg of Kool and the Gang coming out. By the time Kool and the Gang really got hot, we was playing our own originals. But we did, play some Kool and the Gang just, on their first, 2 albums or what have you. But basically, we was trying to recognize funk, which, James Brown was, I guess, the funkiest that we actually, played,
Yeah, and all those groups you mentioned came from that same area, basically, either Jersey or New York.
Yes.
Yeah, and Mandrill also a very sort of immigrant-based type of act, and
Right.
Those boys are from a little bit. They were like in the Flushing area, Mandrill boys, Panamanian guys. But yeah, we knew them, and they knew us, and yeah, they were pretty. Back in the days, bands were friendly, but bands used to battle. So we all respected each other. But again, like Mandrill was one of the bands that we enjoyed because of the diversity of the music. Horns plus instrumental percussion, so on and so forth. And at the time when we're coming up, the big bands like Earth, Wind and Fire, we enjoyed them, and Chicago and Blood, Sweat and Tears. Almost any bands with horns, we enjoyed, and sometimes we would cover. But one thing about when we were playing as Dynamic Souls, because then we were Dynamic Souls, if we did cover a song, we arranged it differently. Again, we didn't, we like Morris said, we may make the flute the lead instrument, or the saxophone, or keyboards, guitars. We would arrange it totally different. And also back then, we would play our own original songs. At that time, Muller did most of the original songs, but the way we used to do it back in the days, we would jam, and then we'd sort things out, and then we'll make up a song, and Muller would arrange it. And then when we're doing shows, we'll put them in a show. So So that was one of the things that made us a little unique, because a lot of the bands then that were doing shows, they would just cover bands. They would just cover the song, the original. If they did an Earth, Wind & Fire song, they would do it exactly like Earth, Wind & Fire, or try to replicate Earth, Wind & Fire. If we did an Earth, Wind & Fire song, we would arrange it our own way. And that's what started to, catch attention from people that, especially producers at that time, that if Brass Construction played, don't expect you just to cover songs. Be arranged in a different way, So.
You were a big group too. You had what, 8 or 10 members at that time?
Yeah. I mean, I would say it was about 10 because we had a trombone. But I mean, when we get to the point where we actually became Brass Construction and started recording the Brass Construction, we settled down to 9 members. But at times, local guys at the time, when we were doing a show, and the musicians around, we knew a lot of musicians. So if we're doing a show, it wouldn't be unusual for us to set up and then we'll have, hey guys, can I sit in with you guys? And sure, come on in, and guys just sit in. And we would do the same too when we go around different shows, block parties, whatever we're doing. We'll sit in. So eventually we settled down to the 9 original members, but yeah, there were a lot of guys floating in and out of the band at the time. We would use, 2 guitars and, 2 keyboards. So sometimes, yeah, but it was always around 10 or more. So you got it pretty right there, Scott.
Yeah, party on stage.
Yeah. And then we started to add the girls, and it was a big band,
Morris, you guys being primarily horn players, we talked about groups that you were, covering and things like that. Were there any particular horn players that you can point to that were very influential to your style or that you kind of idolized?
Well, to tell the truth, there only was one at the time, because I met him in person. I took a couple lessons from him. And then from then, he was like the only guy for me. That was Donald Byrd, And that's the only thing I thought about was Donald Byrd, you know what I'm saying? So to me, there wasn't nobody else at the time. Basically, Donald Byrd was the man for me. I mean, I also admire, like some of the TV hosts, like the Doc Sevensons back in the days, he was doing his thing. And eventually, two of the fellas that I actually went to junior high school with, who did make it in performing arts, wound up playing with Doc Sevenson's band. And so I used to, get involved with them because they were actually in the band at the time, right after, high school. And, but basically, that's your question, basically Donald Byrd.
What about you, Mick? Was there any player that you looked up to?
Yeah, for horns, my most favorite horn player is a cat called Roland Kirk. The song Roland Kirk. He's a jazz player. He's famous for playing 2 horns at the same time, and he's a musical genius. But obviously, I enjoy Charlie Parker. And then I used to play as a young cat. There was a guy that brought me in his band. His name was R.J. Jones, and he went under R.J. Jones Review, and he was a saxophone player. And matter of fact, that's how I got one of my top horns from him. But he was similar to, Charlie Parker, but he did a lot of different things. But my first really good horn, I got it from him. At that time, he didn't think it was a good horn. It was a Selma 6. Now it's a very valuable horn. And R.J. Jones, he was a great player, and I learned a lot traveling around with him with his band. So but Roland Kirk, Rashawn Roland Kirk, and that was the man for me when it came to horn playing.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question now. I'm going to throw it out to both of you and see who wants to jump in first. And that is, how did you become Brass Construction? Where did that name come from? And how did you end up getting a record deal? So who wants to jump in first on that one?
Okay, well, I go first.
Go ahead,
Well,
Mark.
it goes back to, I guess, and we was in mid high school, when we had some. Well, I always got long stories and funny stories. And what's funny is that my mother always told me. She said, "Listen, everything happens for a reason, and sometimes things are supposed to be or meant to be. And if one thing knocks it out the box, something else is going to knock it in." So I'm just saying that to say, that's been happening in my life, and it works for me. And the reason why I say it works for me is because just like I told you when I met the guys in the band, it just so happened that I kind of got back into my music teacher and got into the band that he was in, and I met the guys in the band. And so what I'm about to tell you is a kind of funny story also, because we were supposed to be introduced to Jeff Lane, who wound up becoming our manager and producer. Okay. At the same time, on the bus, maybe about 6 months or so before that, I met a gentleman, a guy a couple of years older than me, on the bus, and he had a guitar, and we started talking. I had my horn, and wound up going to his rehearsal, which was he was playing guitar for Jeff Lane. At the time, I was only 15. Okay, so I used to go to him to watch Jeff Lane and his group rehearse, and then come to find out, he said, "Listen, this guy's starting to going to be managing some groups and producing groups and what have you." And I was a little kid, 15 years old, interested in his little daughter, was 14 years old. So he never really paid me any attention. So I was trying to get him to come down to see the group. And he was like, "Oh, okay," like a little kid. "Oh, okay, yeah, someday. And at the same time, we were about to be introduced to this guy, Jeff Lane. Now, why I didn't connect the two people, because Jeff Lane is Jeff Lane's stage name. His home and family name is another name. Mm-hmm. So they say this guy, Jeff Lane, I'm talking about this other guy called Clarence. So it's the two different people as far as I was concerned. So come to wind up, Jeff Lane, I think one of the guys, by some person, introduced Jeff Lane to somebody else, and come to find out, Jeff Lane was coming down. This guy, Jeff Lane, was coming down to our rehearsal to hear us. And he walks in. I was like, "What?" He's like, "What did you do? What are you doing here? You all over the place, like you at everybody's rehearsal." I said, "Well, this is my band." He was like, "What?" I said, "Well, this is the band that, I was trying to tell you about." He was like, "Oh," and then he came with another, I think with Gene Toon or what's the other guy? Taylor. What's his name? Sam Taylor. Yeah, Sam Taylor. And those are the guys who was like in his band. So he was like, "Oh man!" So they all started laughing and crazy, like, "Oh man, you were trying, I bet you had a little toy group, So anyway, basically, that's how we met Jeff Lane. Like, if it wasn't going to be one way, it was going to be the other way.
It's like destined to be.
Destined to be. So anyway, Jeff Lane wind up, liking us and became our manager. And at that time, he booked us around a little bit, and we wound up getting a small single deal with a label that him and his family doctor put together called Doc Records.
Moondoc Records.
Moondoc.
Yeah.
You know about that?
Absolutely.
I'm not familiar. Oh, is that?
But I was.
Is that the early label for BT Express too?
No. What it's been such a long time. We're talking about 45 years ago, but that record label, we did a song called "Two Timing Lady," for Moondock Records. Now, I'm not sure, was it Brass Instruction or are we still under Dynamic Souls?
Well,
but it was the first recording we did, and yeah, there you go. Doc, is it Moondock or Doc Records?
Doc.
It is.
It is Doc. Okay.
And his Brass Construction. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So he's right. Right.
What year is that? 73, 74?
That's 70. Yeah, 70, 73.
Yeah.
Yes, because I was in high school still. Yeah.
And how did that do? What happened with that record?
It played on the radio.
Yeah.
It didn't do too well, but it played.
Remember how it goes?
I gotta let you hear it.
It was really horny, man. It was a lot of horns.
Yeah.
And it was a fast song licks in there.
Fast song. This it was sound like a Cool in the Gang type of thing, but really horns like crazy, like real fast. It's like dope. It sound like they speed it up, but they didn't. That's how fast we played it. I gotta let you hear it.
Yeah, I got to hear that.
But basically that was back in 73 when that came out.
Okay.
And I don't know the original question you asked me, but go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask Mick if you wanted to pick up the story from there.
Yeah. Well, after Moondock, Jeff Lane then connected with BT Express, and he got hot with the song, and he was trying to get a label for us. So what he did was he hooked up with Freddie Frank and Sid Moore. These were producers that had been around a while. Like Sid Moore did a lot with the British Invasion at the time, like managing them, from England. The guys like Donovan on Dave Clark 5 Band. Maybe you don't remember, you may be too young, Scott.
I know my sister used to my older sister.
But that's what he was known for. And Freddie Frank was also doing a lot with gospel music, Shirley Caesar, so on and so forth. But anyway, they loved the band. And those three guys started to try to find us a label. And, we did some demos, blah, 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 blah. And Motown wanted to sign us at the time. And we thought we were going to go with Motown. And then Arista Records wanted to sign us, like Clive Davis. So there was two in the mix. And then Virgin Records jumped into the mix, and we went to England, party in England, and they gave us the whole thing, trying to sign us down there. And then we ended up going with United Artists at the time. That was mainly a film company. They had a record division, but they wanted to get more into R&B, and they thought Brass Instruction would be a great sign for them. So eventually we signed with United Artists. And
did they have War at the time too?
Yeah, they had War.
Yeah,
their most famous band at the time was Grateful Dead and Vanilla Fudge. Was it Vanilla Fudge or something?
Yeah,
they were the songs that had songs on the charts and actually selling records. So they never really had too much of an R&B big band. Yes, they had War, and then they wanted to get Brass Construction, and they were trying to develop that, that R&B label for their company. But anyway, we decided we had options, so we got a pretty good deal, and we ended up with United Artists. And that was in 75. 75 and 74 price.
That was late 74.
Yeah.
That was 74.
Yeah. That's what.
And as far as the name, Scott,
I forgot one part of the story.
okay.
They wanted us to, that's what I was trying to get at, Price. They wanted us to be, change our names because we were still wanting to go on Dynamic Souls. But the music was changing, and they didn't want us to be labeled as a soul band. So they said we got to come up with a name, and that was like it's like a big thing. It's like, hey, everybody, next meeting, everybody come up with ideas for name, because they want to change our name to whatever. And I remember that meeting coming up. Everybody came up with some stuff, Saratoga Brass, and this or that, this or that. But somehow we came out of there and we decided the name was going to be Brass Construction. And when we recorded on the United Artists, they wanted us to record on the Brass Construction. So, I think that's the official, because then we had to actually get a logo. Sid Mura made a logo for the band, and, all the paperwork, and then, the necessary paperwork made it official at that time. It's 75.
I guess that's the logo that was on that picture, right?
Yeah, exactly. That is the City Court building on 54th Street. That's the construction side. And that's the original picture. The outfits there, I used to go to a tailor, a designer tailor, that back then, a little boutique on 54th Street, up on the east side. And what we did was we all went in there, and he had all kinds of stuff. And he just said, you guys pick anything you want. And we just started to pick out stuff, the costume. That's why those costumes a little different. Everybody had, a little different flair. And that was cool, because at the time, bands were used to dress alike. And if you notice on that picture, we all kind of look different. And so there's a little history with that first album cover.
You had to carry some of your horns to the construction site.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's whenever I pass that building, I said, my God, brings back memories. That's the City Court building right there.
Well, of course, that was the first picture I ever saw of you guys. So
yeah.
So Morris, can you tell us some more about what went into the making of that first record, and what are your memories from those sessions? How did it come together?
Well, sleepless nights, number one. Well, as you know, our biggest hit, I guess one would say, is Movin. And, there's some stories about how that started, and guys would tell it different ways, but it's fun, because everybody have a different way of what it was, the way it happened, because it wasn't something that actually was planned. It was something that was a jam, so to speak. And but how the story goes, how I remember it, is basically, well, before, we would say Jeff Lane would come in, which was our producer. We would get there and check the sound and warm up and play. So, of course, back then it wasn't like now. Now you play 8 bars and you just loop it. Back then we played straight through. So you got to get our chops together. So we started jamming, a rhythm, so to speak, and not playing the songs that we were supposed to be recording, just warming up, playing something, and that something became a jam, and the jam that I'm talking about is Movin. So Jeff Lane came in, heard it, and just told the engineer to hit record. And basically, we just jam. And I think it was originally, how many minutes, Mick? 20, 15?
It was about 20 minutes of jamming. Never know.
20 minutes, straight through. So we just jamming. And next thing you know, when we stopped, it was like, okay. And then it's recorded. Finish telling us the story, Mick. I mean, tell your part. I mean, basically.
Yeah, well, I remember being in the studio. I went in there with Wade Williston, Joe Alpha Wong, Larry, and Wayne Paris was there also. And Wade started to play that bass line, and it was a funky bass line. And then everybody started stepping in. Larry, the drummer, Joe started the guitar going on, and we would all. I remember everybody was playing the percussions in terms of the cowbells and the maracas, and we were all shaking, blah 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 blah. And that's how it started. I mean, Randy hadn't arrived yet, but when he did arrive, he'd already did a lot of charts for the song that we were supposed to do. And Jeff Lane told him, no, we ain't got time to do that. We're going to do this one. We're going to do this one. And so Jeff said, well, come up with some ideas, guys, come up with some lyrics and arrangements, so on and so forth. So we kept on jamming and kept on. We only did that one jam, basically, that entire session. And then later on, when we came back to the studio sessions, Randy started to arrange. But the old horn line, if you remember, Price, we used to play that in one of our jazz songs.
Yeah.
Ba, 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 ba. So it was one of those horn lines that we used to play.
Yeah.
We put that in there. Randy arranged it in there. And then the thing that kicked it off was, at that time, the Moog synthesizer was new. The synthesizing was just coming out, and we got a Moog. It came in, and Randy was like fascinated with the Moog, and he wouldn't stop playing it. Remember on the jam, he would just jam.
Yeah, it's a really cool part.
Right. Yeah, if you kind of go back, not many bands was using a Moog synthesizer. It had just came out maybe, and it was rock bands.
Stevie Wonder was about it.
Yeah, rock bands used it. Not too much in R&B, and that was catchy, and he kept on with that. And then he came up with the idea that he wanted to put some strings in it, and he said, "Okay." At that time, these are real strings, these musicians who play strings, union musicians, a lot of money. So I remember a little fight about that. Jeff Lane didn't want to put strings, it cost too much, but somehow we put the strings in the song. So what made the song was that there were so many different elements within the song. There was a little bit for everybody. There was horns, there were strings, there was this new sound called the synthesizer, the Moog synthesizer, and the jam, and then the message was relevant at the time. Got myself together, let's moving on. And again, you could try a million times to get a hit record, and you'll never get one. You could be the most talented and skilled person in the world and write, and then the most simplest things are the things that become successful. And that's what Movin was. It was a jam that became successful, And it was, and a lot of people would say, well, you never came back with a Movin. Yeah, because it's hard to come back with a jam that, it was hard to recapture that. But that's how basically the Movin came around. It was a jam. We worked on it, arranged it. And one more point on that, it became a very popular in clubs, because before Movin, a lot of songs were no more than 4 minutes, 3 minutes. You couldn't play songs on the airways too long. But they would start to play Movin, and we had cut it down from 20, and it was still a 10-minute song. And so they would play that on the air. That was unusual too. And so
and discos were just starting to get popular.
Exactly. That's what disco started to come in.
How can I hear the 20-minute version?
Well, you know what, Price? I think you have the tape. Didn't you find the tapes of the old reel-to-reel tapes? Somewhere?
I have it, but I don't have a machine.
We have no machine to play it. It's on one of those.
Prints.
You know the wheel-to-wheels, the 2-inch tapes, Scott?
Oh yeah. I don't have one anymore, but I did.
we might have it, So that would be interesting.
So, Morris, how surprised were you and the rest of the guys that it hit as big as it did?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I was really surprised because I didn't think Movin was going to be the song, you know what I'm saying, at first, you know, because, you know, um, to tell you the truth, it wasn't my favorite, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, I liked it, of course, but I didn't think that, you know, that was going to be the song until we started building on it, building on it, building on it, building on it. But like Mick said, you know, we added, you know, the horns, then we added the synthesizer, you know, we had the lyrics, and then, you know, then it started to come together. Um, but far as the group itself, uh, we already well, okay, let's go back a little bit. Now, just before us, Jeff Lane had already produced, and which we was supposed to be the first group, but we kind of, you know, put us aside, sort of on the back burner, and BT came out first. So while BT had, you know, their first album playing, you know what I'm saying, and basically a hit, you know, that's when our album was just starting to hit. So we kind of felt the vibes from that, as we was part of that. At least I did, because, you know, we played, a couple of the guys played on BT Express songs. You know, a couple of musicians played on BT's albums. A couple of horn players played. Larry Payton did some drums on BT's album. You know, Randy did string arrangements and played flute. You know, so we was involved with BT. So to me, kind of BT's success, you know, kind of dwindled down, you know, Brass' success, because yeah, I figured, I said, well, dad, if they could make it, you know, and I thought we was a better group, you know, at that time, you know, I was saying, well, I figured that we was going to make it, you know what I'm saying? So it kind of dwindled down. So for Brass to really, you know, make it, you know, and that first thing, it wasn't a total big surprise, you know. I just said, okay, we're moving on, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Well, and that BT Express, of course, had Express, which was primarily instrumental hit also,
Right.
Right.
and Do You Satisfied, which,
Mhm.
yeah, I was a little kid then. I bought that 45.
Okay.
Yeah. See, that's mainly sax, but there's like trumpet undertones in there that's just real low, you know, to fill it out. And then, and like I said, Larry Payton did a couple of songs playing drums. You know, I think he did "I Like It." You know, he did the drum beat on there. So we was kind of involved in, you know, the same family, so to speak. So, but you know, it's just the after effects. We wasn't used to performing as, you know, stars, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it felt good. It felt good.
Yeah. I mean, it must have changed your lives. I mean, you're all of a sudden able to perform in front of bigger crowds and things like that, right?
Yes, yes, definitely, definitely.
Yeah, we did some big shows. Pretty much, you name it. At the time, that was you know, Funkadelics. We toured shows with Earth, Wind& Fire, Chaka Khan, Jackson's, Sly and the Family Stones. We did Larry Graham. You name it. You know, War. You could go on and on. We had a lot of fun.
Cool in the Gang.
Yep, all the time. Yep.
We
There's some horn power there between both of you guys.
Oh yeah, yeah, they're great, man, and great guys too. And when we toured with them, did shows with them, we always had a lot of fun. Um,
one
yeah,
of our first big tours. We did OJ tour, OJ and Commodores. No,
was it Rick James?
The Rick James came along in '78.
Okay,
no,
yeah, okay. We did
OJ's
Rick James later. Then
and the Commodores.
it was Commodores. Yeah, we did.
And then from there we left and did, which I say, you know, was my graduation to the funk. We toured with um, Parliament,
Yep.
and we opened up there. Bootsy opened up for them at the time. We
Mm.
was a supporting act, and then and from there, you know, I would say we was all funked up at that
We're all
time.
funked up. Ever since we've been very, very good friends, and
Uh, and then from there, we had to mellow ourselves. We did the Jacksons,
yeah,
but you know, to go to the Jacksons at that time for me, you know, which was a mellow group. a lot of guys, wasn't into the Jacksons, but to open up for the Jacksons, that was something, that unique for us. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Well,
it
the
felt,
Commodores had done that, so
you know what I'm saying? To open up for the Jacksons was something at that time, you could say, okay, what you do? I open up for the Jacksons. Okay, you in there, you know. That's the claim to fame, so to speak.
when you guys played with Parliament Funkadelic, was it just after the first album, or was it a few albums in?
After the first album.
Wow. So that must have been quite an experience.
Definitely.
Was
They were just getting seasoned themselves,
Yeah, was that before or after they started landing the mothership?
They
Before
landed the mothership on the tour that we was with them. The
yeah,
mothership.
sure.
Yeah, I
We
remember
was
that.
we started with them before they started landing the ship, and then they started landing the ship maybe after the first set of tour, gigs, and then they started landing the ship, and then it was gone from there.
Yeah,
And like I said, Bootsy was the new guy.
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, such great music times back then. I miss them.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
Now, you mentioned, Morris, that you weren't like the most keen on Movin. Now, the first record only had 6 tracks. Was there another cut on there that you kind of were more hyped about than Movin?
Well, at that time, the song that I felt more grooving with was, I guess, with Changin and Dance, because it had more, rhythms and what have you, and you know, uh, and it had a bridge, what I'm saying. It had, not that it really had more horns, but it was something that, I didn't really start appreciating moving until I guess after it started really playing on the radio and listening to it. To me, it was still just a jam, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And it was just still just a jam.
but Changing got love too and got play.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, that's a great cut too.